thousands of years I lay dormant. Who has disturbed my...
Hey, best buddy.
Oh, it's you.
Scrolling through Instagram looking for a motivation, I came to the conclusion that all these art gods are basically masters of light. The way these artists paint lighting is just... I mean, they're better at painting light than Avatar is at bending the elements. I mean, just look at this. So the first thing I realized was I basically know nothing about lighting. Now obviously we don't want to be that one guy who doesn't know anything, so we have to look into light now and actually study it. So fast forward getting sidetracked, I'm actually pretty smart now. Okay, so to boil down light and how it works into simple terms, it works like this. We as people only see light. If there was no light present, everything would look like this. Light will have the same intensity to a specific point while it travels and then will fall off. This is considered light fall off. This is also where light and shadows tend to mix. Another way light and shadow tend to mix is via subsurface scattering. Light can also pass through objects according to the material. The surface of the material or object or whatever you're painting also has an effect on the highlights of it. The more rough a surface is, the more diffused highlights tend to be, and the smoother it is, the more precise and specular they are. The color of the light will also affect whatever the local color is of whatever you're painting. For example, a warm light will make the local color of whatever you're painting appear warmer, and vice versa with cool light. When it comes to shadows, there's still light present in it. Most of the time that light is what's responsible for the shadow colors and everything. This light is basically determined mostly by your environment and whatever's surrounding whatever you're painting. When it comes to reflections, you have to think about what kind of material you're painting. For example, plastics only reflect the lighter colors in the scene compared to the metal, which will have full reflectivity and reflect the light and darker colors. Reflections in glass and water are basically just magic.
You're a wizard, Harry.
It's got to do with the viewing angles and how light enters things. So the way I like to think about light when I'm painting it and how I like to approach it is by splitting it up into two different categories. The first category I like to think about is the direct lighting. This is basically any light source which is responsible for your main shadows, cast shadows and that. It's usually your most powerful light source. I also include rim light in here. The second category is indirect lighting. This is basically any reflected light, ambient light or bounce light that's in your scene. I also include any distant diffuse light that's more adding to your shadow colors instead of changing your shadow structure. Okay, so now that you hopefully understand what I mean by direct and indirect lighting from the balls of wisdom, let's actually take references, break them down and paint them, because putting into practice is the best way to actually get better.
Nice.
Okay, so for the first reference, the direct light source is obviously coming from the right. This is basically all of this area here. The second and the indirect light source would be all the blue on her face, on her shirt and on a little bit on her shoulder. You can see how subtle it is. This is the ambient blue light coming down from the sky. And when I was finished, I was like,
hey, that's pretty good.
The next reference study, I kind of wanted to do my own thing and it turned out kind of doo-doo water. But anyway, let's break it down. This area would be the direct light source obviously, and the indirect light source in this case would be bounce light from the wall that's coming from the direct light source. There's no ambient light in this scenario since she's kind of indoors, I think. I don't actually know, the bounce light is red because the wall is red, obviously. Because remember, when light bounces off something, it gets saturated with that color. Okay, so the second reference study turned out a flop. You know, these things happen. But I did find some mistakes and things I wanted to fix.
This one, I call it bold and bright.
More like belongs in the trash.
Okay, so for the third reference, it has a bit of both. It has the ambient light from the sky and the bounce light from the what I assume is a yellow shirt. Honestly, I don't really know. There could be some dude there holding a yellow piece of paper up for all I know. Point is, it's there in the reference that we painted. That being said, when I do reference studies, I'm not trying to copy it 100% because I'm not a photocopy machine. We all want to add our own spice and artistic flair to things. Okay, so the mistakes I had to fix in this was basically the values and the colors, because in the last one the values weren't that good and the saturation of the colors were dialed up to 11. First off, I started fixing my values with the level tool since it's easier than repainting stuff or adding more layers and things. So basically all I do with the levels tool is just deepen the darks and lighten the lights. Obviously don't go overboard. The curves tool is good for making colors pop and bring out certain colors in your pieces. It's also good for making little changes and things like that. But more importantly, the curves tool can sometimes save your paintings completely. Let me show you what I mean. Like on this reference study, before I used levels in the curves tool, the difference is basically night and day. I don't even know why I stopped using these tools. It literally just makes everything so much easier and fixes things for you. Obviously these things aren't magically going to turn you into an art god. As I said, this is mainly to fix and make adjustments.
Not bad, not bad.
So after doing all these reference studies, I had an epiphany. Multiply sucks or I'm an idiot. My solution to the problem was to start using linear burn instead. What's nice about the blend mode is the fact that I can keep my colors light and slightly saturated with color and will end up looking good on the skin in that. It's not going to look kind of dead or whatever like Multiply does. With Multiply I sometimes have to use different colors in different areas and it gets very irritating. Linear burn kind of fixes that problem. Okay, now we're quickly going to borrow some lighting from this reference here. Okay, so let's get the quick sketch out the way in the base colors. Also, before I start painting shadows and lighting, I'd like to have a bit of a background going. This usually helps me understand how I'm meant to paint the light and shadows. Okay, so if you've watched my first video, you kind of realize I like using blend modes when I paint. I just like them because they do a lot of the things for you, especially when it comes to lightening and darkening stuff.
It's free real estate.
Also, when I paint the different light and shadow and everything on different layers, I can customize it how I want to according to color and opacity. Especially if I make a mistake, which I make a lot of them. And since I merge everything together, I don't have to deal with every single blend mode. It's just basically to get your colors to start painting. Okay, so obviously I'm not painting directly from the reference here. I'm painting my own character. So when I'm painting the shadows now, I'm not going to try to focus on all the small details. I'm just trying to get the overall feel done. Because obviously on what I'm painting, her ear is peeking out, different facial structure, clothes and whatnot. I'm just trying to emulate that nice leaf effect from the shadows. Also, I don't know if you noticed, I added a third layer for shadows for those really dark areas. Okay, so for actually painting light now, I basically just use an overlay layer towards the upper part of the color wheel, since everything below 50% darkens and everything above will lighten it. This is usually the direct lighting or main light source. Also, if you want to be lazy and just paint everything in quickly, take your main shadow area, select it, and then invert everything, and you can just quickly fill everything with that color that you want in your light layer. Okay, so when it comes to actually painting the highlights of the parts in the direct lighting, I like to actually split them up into different areas now, because as I said before, the different materials have different reflective qualities and everything like that. Her clothes are obviously made out of a fabric, so it's not going to have all these very shiny, bright and sharp highlights like a leather jacket or something would. This is what I mean by doing highlights on different layers now. I mean, I can make layers, I may as well use them. Painting indirect lighting in a lot of cases is a lot more simple since it's mainly present in the shadow areas. Indirect lighting is also good for giving that extra spice and flair to your shadows and that. It's what's responsible for a lot of the shadow colors being present. Again, the lazy way to do this is just to select your main shadow layer, and then obviously on your new layer you paint what you need to for your indirect light. Most of the time I'm just using a soft light layer to paint in the indirect light. The second layer is just kind of like highlights in the indirect lighting. I don't always do this, I just do it if I feel it's necessary. Because now we're basically just rendering and fixing the fact that she looks like Sid from Ice Age. You're probably wondering why I leave the juicy subsurface scattering between the shadows and lighting till now. It's mainly because I'm lazy and I don't want to work with the colors. I'm pretty sure this is called the Terminator or something. So now usually the values will change slightly at this area since the way light and shadows meet, but we ignore that since we're inspired from anime. I usually just use a color layer with either an orange or a reddish tint, then I just paint in between the light and shadow areas. Then obviously we dial the saturation up to 11 to make it even more juicy. Now I'm just basically adding different textures and stuff where I need them to be, and then making slight adjustments with the color adjustment curves and levels tool. Also just blur a bit of the back of the head for more depth. Obviously for the background now it's just basically making a bit of a mess in the back so it looks like something, and then drawing a bit of leaves so it looks like you're good at backgrounds. Remember to make adjustments with the tools if you feel it's necessary, and never forget that blur is your best friend when it comes to painting backgrounds like this. This is kind of the same thing but without reference. Don't worry, I'm not going to bore you with the exact same thing and hold your hand through this one too. I just thought it would be interesting to show you with reference and without reference. I don't know if I should be concerned that they kind of look like different characters, but anyway. Hopefully this video shed some light on the subject.
Ha ha ha! Classic comedy.
I appreciate you watching the video and remember to like and sub if you enjoyed the content.